Now the latest this thing, I thought of bringing that concept as such. It is not just the interest that Arab is trying to show just because US is trying to do something or some other country is trying to show, or human rights violation, or these are not major issues. I think it's the issues with regard to what the structure they have there with regard to the groups they have, the Alawites, the Druze, then the Maronite Christians, and as well as the Sunnis, the majority Sunnis. Basically Alawites being the minority, still they are ruling that one. So basically the Druze and the Wahhabis, basically Saudi Arabia, they have a common concept. It's a concept called Tawheed, that is monotheism. Basically Tawheed is common to both of them, but Druze still believe in a little of mysticism, that is like a person can be divine, but he cannot be equated to a god. That's how they say. They put it in simple way that one can see themselves in the mirror and they can be only that much. They cannot say that I can replace that one, I can stand as a stand on the other side. It's only that concept that one can say that they have, after a particular point of time in the divine movement, that they have attained that divinity, but they cannot be equated with God. So although there are here little differences, but certainly the Wahhabism concept of Wahhabism can go much closer to this one. It is the larger interest that Saudi Arabia has in this one. Although in the initial stage they came together, basically Egypt, Syria and Saudi Arabia came together and they tried forming something. This has been a driving factor which has been playing a major role in Syria. Emergence of new security issues such as water, basically this is with regard to Turkey, Syria and Iraq, basically, where Turkey is trying to control and build more hydropower systems there, which it's been troubling the Euphrates and Tiger basin. Basically these are the two major ones which is blocking water for Syria as well as Iraq. This is also bone of contention which is very, very strong. As I said, I am not an authority on Wahhabism because I have someone who is an authority in this one, Nalapat sir. We have learned from whatever he has spoken about Wahhabism. But although I need to say that Wahhabism has the perverted version which we say, although it started as a noble part of the Islam, basically, wherein there were too many issues with regard to the Islam, specifically in this region, where there were issues of copying other religions. Basically people started tying threads to the trees and they started worshipping the tombs and all these things. So Al-Wahhab came up with this issue that in Quran there can be nothing other than Allah. So you cannot have these symbols. So symbolism was objected by Wahhab. So he went on to get the trees cut and also he destroyed some of the famous tombs. Under his ideology these things happened. But in the later stages this whole concept of Wahhabism got so perverted that has been used for different other reasons. So the perverted form of Wahhabism has taken a different shape in this region. So that has been one of the major challenges for the region because that has been a driving factor with few of the countries who are showing their importance in the region as such. We see the common challenges between West Asia and South Asia. Again, terrorism becomes an important one. Both of us have been suffering. On the one hand, we want to have good relation with West Asia, but when we see some of them, whether irrespective of whether the concept of terrorism or the actions of terrorism are directly affecting our region or not, the very idea called terrorism has to be opposed. So it is a very difficult situation for South Asia, specifically India, to talk about terrorism because you have to have a good relation with Iran, wherein they have been called as sponsors of terrorism in some other places, although that may come out of some necessity that to show their own power in the region. But on the other hand, it might be Al-Qaeda which got major part of the support from Saudi Arabia. But all these have to be managed. That is one of the important factors. But both of us, on the other hand, as a region, like West Asia as well as South Asia, both of us have to confront this major problem of terrorism. Wahhabism, I already spoke about it. Water security, yes indeed, this has been a major problem for both the regions. Both the regions are confronting with this one. I think as some of the scholars say, the next decade would be an issue in international relations that would be highly dealt with the issue of water security, I think. So, and the issue of great power rivalry, yes, although I also wanted to highlight a bit on the colonial experience. although it was not so typical the way we experienced colonialism, West Asia experienced, but part of West Asia they also experienced, like Syria experienced part of it, and the impasse between the time Caliphate left and then Saudi Arabia became a strong place. Till then, the way Great Britain played the role in between. So they also have some common challenges that we also faced and they have also faced. There where we also have some cultural understanding that we can deal with. But great power rivalry, specifically I meant to say the way the region has been used in both the contexts. Like South Asia has also been abused and used both the ways by the great powers. On the other hand, even West Asia has been subjugated to this one. Moving on to the other part, that is specifically like Pakistan. When we take, although everybody says only as an epicenter of terrorism, it just doesn't stop that way. Pakistan has been facing terrorism within its own region, but is also sponsoring terrorism in other regions. That has been a major issue for us. It has been also a linking factor between West Asia and South Asia. Saudi Arabia's covert support in terms of ideology and financing for terrorist organizations operating in Pakistan and Kashmir has been a major concern for India as such, because on the one hand we want to have better relations with Saudi Arabia, but because of these issues it has to calm down. Again, morning as our distinguished Professor Shidran said, that there are other factors where we can control or subdue the problems or conflicts with regard to other issues. Maybe economic relations can be one of the major issues where we can bring down this tension. So when we converse with Saudi Arabia, generally these items would come down. They don't take the primordial position, rather the other issues of trade and commerce would take the major issues. So on the one hand, India tries to stabilize the region, as it's been already, South Asia has been called as the region of turbulence or very unstable region. So India always tries to do its part to stabilize the region, whereas Pakistan always counters us with making the region, or it pushes us to instability, or every time it comes up with a newer challenge to make sure that the region is never stabilized. State-sponsored terrorism is one of the major issues to which India is facing major problem. It is getting spilled over to the other countries even in South Asia. That's one of the important factors. Asymmetric conflict, again, is essentially part of it. Along with it, low intensity conflicts. Although we see or immediately we don't see any war that's going to happen between the countries, but I think the other concept of low intensity conflicts have taken place, and also they have become very prominent. For Pakistan, the rise of India is a strategic nightmare on the one hand, because I remember Musharraf having said this or made this particular statement: even if the Kashmir issue is solved, we would continue to haunt India because India is a bully or India is a hegemon, regional hegemon. That's how we are viewed. Again, I don't want to get into the argument of hegemony because it is the structure. Again, we see US as a hegemon, somebody else is behind us and they say call us as a hegemon, then it goes on and on. And while the rise of China is an opportunity to curb India's advancement and reduce dependence on the United States, I think the predecessor speakers have spoken about all those things. Specifically, the road ahead, both of us need to work on countering terrorism and also work towards refraining countries sponsoring terrorism, because we cannot very strongly be assertive as such in this region. So what specifically we can do is we can have better relation and ask them to refrain from doing this one so that it doesn't spill over to our region and become a nuisance. Need to make sure that the great power rivalry does not use either of the region for their benefit, like drying and all those things, and work closely on trade and commerce. And the important factor or the cushion effect that we have is the diaspora that we can successfully use, the soft power that we speak about. That has to be used as a strong link between South Asia and West Asia. That can be the founding stone for going ahead in this cooperation. India, with the second largest Muslim population in the world, having a significant portion of Shias, is understandably concerned about situations in West Asia, which is a common thing, which is common sense that one can use and understand. normalizing the situation is the utmost important task ahead for both the regions. As such, we have to do so. But coming on to the India's policy response to both West Asia and South Asia, if you see, with regard to West Asia, I don't want to go country by country. I would like to highlight few of them only specifically. If we take the concept of, or if we take the relation with Iran, the way we are trying to manage is really one has to appreciate, because such a volatile region, and if we go too closer to Israel, again it is a problem. If we go too closer to Saudi Arabia, it's a problem. But still we have to maintain ourselves with or maintain a good relation with Iran, which is extremely important for us. And I think we have been successful, except the pipeline thing, which is still not taken off. Other than that one, I think somewhere we are able to strike a balance. That is also something unique that India has been trying to do. And Mr. Krishna visited in 2010. I think that also boosted some sort of relation between India and Iran. With regard to India, Israel and Palestine, on the one hand we are trying to maintain our stand on Palestine, which we are saying that no, we will continue to support this cause. On the other hand, we are able to maintain our relation with Israel also. And with Israel, I think research and development, and also for our own military requirements, we are able to have better relations with them. That is something, again, an interesting thing that has happened with South Asia and West Asia. We are able to strike a balance between. With regard to India and Turkey, again, it's an interesting concept, because we have our own relations in the history also. When the caliphate was supposed to be abolished, there was a Khilafat movement in India also. And Mr. Gandhi collected money basically to send it to Turkey. And by the time the money reached the caliphate was abolished. But subsequently, the legacy remains, because that money was used for constructing their first parliamentary house. So one way we have a better relation with Turkey. But on the other hand, also there are several companies or several entrepreneurs who have gone from India, and they have established several companies and other things. We have some sort of good relation with Turkey also. We have been able to manage them. India and Saudi Arabia, although for a long time we did not have great relation with them, post 2006 when King Abdullah visited, post his visit, suddenly there was a series of visits from other countries like Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Syria, all these people. I think they were all just waiting. It was a watershed moment for India also, because they were all waiting for someone to take the lead. I think Saudi Arabia was seen as an elder brother in the whole region as such, apart from Iran and Israel in this particular thing, and also Syria. But somewhat to an extent, to understand the whole concept as such, I think Saudi Arabia's move in 2006 was very, very interesting. And post that one, we have had better relations. I think along with that one, the thirst for, the energy factor, it has been one of the important factors. Like India imports at least 60% of our hydrocarbon needs are from West Asia, and this dependence will only grow in future. So India is cautious in its approach to West Asia. And specifically for India, it's a region of augment of its power, but certainly it cannot be assertive. On the one hand, we say, when we talk about China, we talk about Southeast Asia and all this, or within South Asia, we say that India has to be assertive. It has to signal, and all this language we use. With regard to West Asia, I don't think India can be in a position to be assertive. It can only augment its interest, because they have nothing to lose. Basically, if we are not close to them, apart from giving some moral this thing that we are there. And India is also a major power which is growing, and also diaspora. I don't deny that concept, but still it will be us, or it will be the South Asians who will be the losers, not the West Asian people. The thrust of India's West Asia policy and diplomacy thus has been geared towards mobilizing resources like political, strategic, economic and cultural from the region to contribute in its emergence as global power. I already spoke about the cautious way India is dealing with India, Israel and Iran, Israel and Palestine. India has been trying to keep the relation more as bilateral with these countries. That is something one as scholars or as students of international relations we have to observe with regard to West Asia. India is not trying to do multilateralism here. It's very clear it's doing bilateral, because there are so many issues, and the region is volatile, and it's in its own interest that it has bilateral relations, and it's trying to keep it that way only, so that it is much safer for it to go ahead in the region as such. With regard to South Asia, the way India's policy response has been, although others have dealt with, India has altered between active engagement, neutral brokerage, and subtle persuasion in attempting to achieve desired conflict management and foreign policy goals with its war-torn neighbors, including Nepal and Sri Lanka. But it's still trying to be assertive in this region. But before it becomes a power in the in this region, there are a lot of theoreticians who say first there has to be acceptance within the region itself. But India lacks that acceptance in this region, although with regard to territory and other things, we still are a major power in this region as such, but we still haven't moved beyond that part. But with regard to West Asia, it is India's interest that it has to be very careful in dealing with